Right, session is being recorded. Just put it on
Okay.
recording. Okay.
Okay, sure. Hi, everyone. Tonight we are going to talk about functional assessment during early years, 0 through 5 years overview. That is the topic of discussion today. And we are going to talk about the basics and overview of the process. So some of the information may be redundant, but it'll be definitely beneficial for us to refresh our memory. And my job tonight is to facilitate a discussion, keep us on track, and record some of our thoughts. So let's go ahead and start, get introduced. And my name is Bhagya Dinesh, and I am a certified speech language pathologist. And I have been an SLP since 2002, and I have done extensive work in both pediatrics and geriatrics. And I have worked in multiple settings such as public schools, skilled nursing facilities, senior nursing, outpatient, child find early intervention program, and telepractice. And currently, right now, I am doing telepractice full time in a public school district in California. So today, the agenda that we are going to follow is we are going to define what is communication. It's then coming to early communication and ways and means of communication during the early years. Then we are going to talk about why do we need to understand what is early communication. Then talking about definition of functional assessment. And we are going to talk about briefly what is screening, what is assessment, what are the tools and guidelines and features of assessment. And then coming to team involved while testing 0 through 5 year children. And then we're going to talk about, I have like multiple performance or the protocols that I follow. So I'm going to share some of those things, and some of the things will be given as takeaway if you're interested. So some of the things I cannot kind of share like, one-on-one, but I'll be showing some of those for as guidelines. So I've been an SLP since 2002, and I have, gathered all these materials over the years, and most of the things are online. And depending on, the population and the setting, what you're kind of working, you can kind of pick and choose which one would be the best for you. And since I am, currently working in United States, so my audience, whatever I have been working is monolingual English speaking kids. And, I'm a foreign trained therapist. I'm a multilingual speaker. So I kind of pick and choose what is available, the resources over there. And with my expertise, I come up with the conclusion. And I also do bilingual testing where Spanish, I have a lot of Spanish speaking kids. And I use interpreters, like, if I do not know the language, there are a couple of tests that's available in Spanish and English. And there are some protocols available, and then the test methodology is given. So with the help of that person, I kind of do the testing and come up with the clinical judgment. So I'll be talking about that at the end, and then comes the discussion or questions. So it's called asking and sharing, and then comes the conclusion. And Chanda is my colleague. We were classmates in bachelor's, and I've known her for the past, I think 20 years. So thank you, Chanda, for giving me this opportunity. And definitely it's a learning, process for me and the participants today. So I would highly recommend, do not go only on this, but definitely feel free to, talk to your other professionals, colleagues, and take in the information from the session today. And definitely I want to be a helpful person for you guys. And if in case something, it's kind of deviant from the population, what I'm talking about, so please bear with me. And currently in India, as you all know, there are like a lot of languages and a lot of, dialects and everything. So since I've not been in India for the past couple of years, I do not kind of, know what are the basic tests that's available. But I have been in touch with my colleagues here. So I do have names of a couple of tests that I can email you. But, just in case you want some things particular to your language, you can email me and I can find resources for you. Otherwise, tailor these things, like whatever we are talking about, into your own, clinical settings and your language. Okay, so we'll go start the presentation. Please bear with me. I'm kind of
That's okay, Dave. That's okay.
okay. So let's get started. Thank you again, and hope I am, and I'm going to be useful to you guys, and hope you enjoy the session today. So the first part is communication. Definition of communication, it's very, it looks very simple. It's the act of transferring information from one person to another person. And there is a sender, message, and a recipient. And the sender sends the message, and through the medium, it could be verbal, non-verbal, or written form. And then the recipient kind of decodes it. So outwardly, when we look at communication process, it's very simple, but definitely, as you all know, we have been a speech pathologist for a number of years. We know that it is very complex, and it's very hard to get like a word from a child who is very nonverbal. So we are really working hard to put things together to make this process happen. So communication is a process by which we are kind of sharing our emotions and joy, fear, etc. It's definitely very, very helpful at school and work. If we don't communicate our thoughts or feelings, there are things that would be lost. So definitely we are a great asset to the community. So, pat yourself that, we are all speech pathologists. Next, coming to what is early communication. Early communication, as the word indicates, it's like children, before they kind of learn language, they use like a lot of other things like gestures, vocalization, facial expression, and to express themselves. So this process is called pre-symbolic or emerging communication. So during the early stage, these gestures, vocalization, facial expressions, those are all unintentional. That means without the baby is knowing, the baby is doing it. Like for example, if the baby cries, mom or dad would know the baby is crying for some reason. So they kind of come to the baby and checks on, if the diaper is wet, or if the baby is hungry, or if the baby is in pain, or, for a number of reasons. But over the period of time, these things kind of, gets learned. It becomes a intentional and a conventional behavior. For example, a baby is kind of waving hands, or, saying hello, or giving a smile when visitor comes. So over the period of time, when, the person becomes more familiar, the baby will start definitely communicating in the form of waving, or stretching the hands, or going towards the person, so etc. So those are all like basic rudimentary gestures that's happening. So coming to reasons why we communicate, as we all know, we are communicating, but why do we communicate? So in the early years, there are 3 reasons why the baby is communicating. One is for behavior regulation. Next is for social interaction and joint attention. So as our name goes, behavior regulation is what? Like, the baby wants to, request something or protest something. The baby kind of either, points to it, or, grunts at it, or something like that, screams at it. So it's kind of, trying to tell us something. And then social interaction. So the baby is kind of going towards something, then that means that, oh, the baby has some needs. So we'll kind of give a choice. Okay, do you want this? So sometimes, we kind of understand from the facial expression of the baby, or joint attention, so gaining adults attention for something. So the baby wants something that is up in the closet, or in the closed jar, or cookies in the jar or something. So the baby may kind of point to the jar, or the baby may be kind of rattling the cookie box. So then it kind of, the noise kind of gets the attention of mom or dad, and then they have an interaction. So that's called joint attention. Two people kind of attending to the same thing. So this is all like pre-verbal or pre-linguistic communication. So initially, as I told you, it's all unintentional, but kind of over the period of time, these kind of gets reinforced, and then the mastery happens, and then it becomes intentional. And then these are some of the ways, as I told you before, I'm not kind of going over and over this again. So like, stretching the arms towards the mom, or, shifting the eyes or head turn, head nod, smiling, frowning, head banging, scratching. So those are some of the ways that, the child kind of communicates in the early ages. And then those are called pre-verbal stage. So as the child kind of gets to an year old, the pre-verbal kind of changes to verbal. And then the child started, joining sounds to, make words. And then it would be kind of upon imitation or repetition. And then kind of, the child kind of starts trying to use a word. So that comes the creative one-word stage. And then as, after 1 or 1.5 years, then the child would start putting the words together. So it's creative multi-word. And then most of the infants, kind of have a set rules and routines how they follow. And it's very, respective to the language and how they kind of acquire what they acquire in the first few years of life. But, hey, Chanda, can you mute?
Yeah. What happened?
No, I can hear some noise.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. So we were talking about what is early communication, right? So we as SLPs, we need to understand why we need to know, or why parents have to understand what is early communication. So most of the toddlers and infants, they have like a typical developmental norms. When something happens, if there is a change in the system, or if there's a change in the makeup, like, or if they have a disorder at the time of birth, or the mom is exposed to radiation, or, mom had some substance abuse, or there is, problem in the, gestation. So whatnot, we have n number of reasons. So there is a, these norms kind of gets delayed. So if there is a change in the typical development, we have to know. And because we know what are these early stages, we can kind of pinpoint, okay, there is some kind of a challenge that's happening. So awareness of these early communication milestones is very, very helpful to help the families and caregivers to understand the standard and the danger moments. And it would be very helpful for them to seek help. Also, as professionals, it would be helpful for us to initiate screening process and get into the diagnostics, which would be helpful to kind of come up if they have special needs, or if they, and that is very helpful for early intervention. And, as I was mentioning that, in US, the first 5 years of life is very important, and they have like tons of resources for the first years of life. They, in United States, the public school system is free until grade 12. And then the first few years of life, usually they get into the school by 5 years of age. For example, if a child is developmentally delayed, or if they suspect some kind of, challenges in these developments, what happens is the mom or dad kind of gets into the, pediatric offices, and then they get a referral, and then they get, either identified between 0 and 3 years, or if they kind of miss out that 0 to 3 years, they get identified around 3 years when they enter school. So instead of 5 years, those kids kind of get screened at 3 years, and then the school starts. It's called Head Start or Early Start, where they kind of help the students with special needs or identified special needs with the school readiness. So it's called a developmental preschool program. We have it there, where there would be like 15 or 18 students in a class. They will have like 9 typicals and 9 identified non-typicals, or they will be in the process of identification. So definitely that is a great asset that, they are kind of working really very hard, because from the economic perspective of the society, it's very important. The earlier, the better.
Before we go into the second part of the whole thing, so Bhagya, you mentioned to us about the definition of the communication. Then you spoke to us about the early communication aspect. Uh, uh, this, when it comes, during my practice, I saw that it was very easy to identify children of a of a higher age, or a bigger children, for difficulties, because we know it is very easy to diagnose, or say there is a there is delay in speech and language skills. However, it's always difficult to diagnose for younger population. What we see in Mumbai also, that children are coming to me at the age of 2 years, sometimes at the age of 1.10. It is very difficult for us to inform parents, any which ways a diagnosis of ADHD, autism is tough during this time. It is very difficult to diagnose for a psychologist also. So when you want to inform the parents, unless and until it's a very clear-cut symptom of a lot of sensory issues, it is very difficult for a speech language pathologist to say, yes, this child requires therapy. He's on the verge of autism. He has red flags of autism. So for that particular time, what Bhagya just mentioned to us about the intentional, pre-intentional, all the non-verbal behaviors, whatever she's mentioned, the non-verbal behaviors seems to be on a very excellent pointers to determine and to speak and to convince our clients about presence of autism, about ADHD, about sensory issues. Working in a child development center, I have realized that when it comes to convincing the clients about OT therapy, about speech therapy, you have to be very specific. What are the difficulties? Why exactly is my child having red flags of autism? So these non-verbal behaviors, these verbal characteristics are extremely important for us to note down and to mention this to the parents. We also run an early intervention center. So what Bhagya just spoke about, the whole early intervention part, as to how essential is that. The main criteria for us right at this point is developing a system of early intervention, which would be really helpful. Carry on, Bhagya, carry on.
Okay. So coming to the functional assessment definition. So this is a definition it is very self-explanatory. It is a long definition, but this is what it's the pointer that we are going to talk today. So functional assessment is continuous collaborative process that is a combination of gathering medical and developmental history, asking meaningful questions to family and caregivers, listening to family stories, and analyzing child skills, behaviors within present everyday routines and activities across multiple situations and settings, along with the clinical judgment. So I was kind of mentioning, for example, if a mom or dad comes, okay, the child is kind of not looking at me when I'm talking, or the child is kind of shy in front of my other family members or my friends or relatives. So usually the first thing is we have to make sure that we understand what background they are coming from. We cannot just kind of go ahead and do the testing. So we need to make sure that we have like a solid idea, like an area of concern, if the concern is really real, or if, you know, it's just, you know, late talking or lack of stimulation. So in US, where I'm working, like the school system, you know, a lot of Spanish speaking kids kind of, you know, they migrate from Mexico to US for various reasons, like for work. You know, Indians, they go from, you know, India to US for various reasons. So sometimes what happens is the parents are real busy with their work and other reasons, and lack of stimulation happens. And then they give like an iPad or iPhone to the kids, and they spend a lot of time on screen. So some of the things they learn from the videos what they watch, sometimes they don't. So, you know, so there are no, like, lot of not a lot of, you know, language rich opportunities available for them to hear or, you know, functionally use. So, you know, they don't know how to behave or how to talk or answer questions to friends or families, or, you know, and they, because of that lack of stimulation, I or like the SLPs cannot go ahead and diagnose, okay, this person has a delayed language, and then, okay, let's hook up with other professionals. So we have to be very, very thoughtful and mindful before we kind of come up with the you know, a diagnosis. So clinical judgment is the very big portion, but I have mentioned it at the last. But, you know, after doing all of other things comes the putting all of those together is the expertise of speech language pathologist. So we have to be very cautious in making the call, okay, this person has a diagnosis and then this person needs help. So continuous, that means that starting from the time they come to us until the first intervention or a therapy service starts, that's, you know, we have to be very prompt and be on task and collaborative. So for example, you know, yesterday I was mentioning a child with Down syndrome, or, you know, already they may have a diagnosis of a syndrome, or like a cleft lip palate, or you know, congenital hearing loss. So in those things, we can kind of, you know, predict, okay, there may be a language delay. So in those conditions, when we have a clear cut, you know, history behind, we have to make sure that we are kind of coordinating and, you know, making relationship between all the early intervention team. But unlike, you know, a person who is moving out from, you know, here to United States, where they were talking, you know, Hindi or Punjabi here, and then they're moving out there, and then, you know, if they're going into a preschool and they're not talking, so, you know, that doesn't mean that this child has a language delay. It's kind of like a language difference, or, you know, lack of stimulation at home, or, you know, the knowledge of the language, like the, you know, English language, it's a, you know, the official language is not known to the child. So, you know, we should give some time. So I'll talk about response to intervention, and you know, how we can guide the family at the end. So for example, if we have a clear cut reason, so it's very easy, it's a collaborative process. But if we do not have a clear cut reason why there is a, you know, delay, or you know, why they are with us, it's our responsibility to make sure we find the problem and the cause, and then, you know, we do this process together. And then observations is very, very useful. So for example, we have to make sure that the child is being observed across variety of settings, at school or at childcare, or you know, at their homes. If the SLPs cannot reach their homes, we can always use the technology. Either we can kind of do a video call, or have them send a video to us. You know, and if the school teachers can kind of record some things and send it to us, so that'll be very, very helpful. Because, you know, this child may be responding to some of the familiar members. Maybe the child is not responding to me in the session because I'm a stranger to the child. So we have to be very cautious, and then we have to ask the family if it can be, oh, you know, maybe the session, that time of the day, you know, maybe the child was sleepy, so the child is not cooperating. So we had to make sure that we do very proper observation. Good amount of time has to be spent on that before we come to a conclusion. And then asking meaningful questions. So this is very important because we have to respect, as a speech therapist, we have to know what are the priorities and concerns of the family. We have to have like a lot of open-ended questions, to gather informations. And I have like a couple of things that you can kind of either use it, or when we come to the testing, I can share some of those questions to you. So, and we have to understand what are the concerns of the family and where the family has already gone and obtained resources, if they are guided properly, or if that is a new client to us, we have to make sure that we kind of guide them. And then analyzing. So if, for example, if the child is Down syndrome or a cleft lip palate or hearing loss that I was mentioning, so they would have kind of done, vision testing or a hearing testing from before, or they would have, if the child is like a 3.5-year-old, if the child is going to a school, we can kind of get those reports from the doctor's office and the school. So we have to make sure that we gather all those information and then do a proper analysis. And then we also have to kind of observe with the child in various parts of the communities. For example, if the SLP can go into their homes or at the park, or the child, the daycare, etc. And so we have to make sure that we kind of get permission ahead of hand, and let the people know that we are coming, and but maybe not let the child know that that we are going to test, but definitely it would be a good idea to get a rapport with the child, making sure that sometimes the kids will not respond to strangers, so make sure that we have to get a friendly environment before we kind of go ahead and do observations. So coming to, I was kind of mentioning, I'm going to go over what are the screening and assessment overview, right? So we've been talking all this time, ideally about functional assessment. So overall assessment, why we do is for various reasons: to identify special needs, to support learning, to support the caregivers and families, teachers, to improve quality of care, guide planning for instruction, school readiness, monitoring of individual student progress over time. So I had a client, who got a job in, Microsoft, and they were a Tamil-speaking family who moved recently from India to my place in Washington. So what happened was that this child is kind of diagnosed as autism spectrum disorder in Chennai. So when they came there, she did not have anyone. And she was kind of referred to me from one of the other therapists who used to work in Chennai. So she kind of mentioned, okay, this family is coming, and if you want, you can kind of either guide them, or, you can do intervention. So this was really very nice, because he was a 3-year-old and she did not know. First one is language challenges. So mom and son only speak Tamil, and the dad can speak English and Tamil. So there, the testing is going to happen in English. And, with the interpreter, they tried to do it, and then the child would not cooperate. So, I had to kind of help them. And then we kind of came up with a plan when I will go and help them. So it kind of, as an SLP, I was able to support the family and caregivers and explain the process. Okay, so this is very different from India to there. And then how we can use all the special education resources available to this family. And this mom was thinking that she was ignorant about the fee and the therapy charges and stuff. So it was very helpful when somebody with better knowledge can help them, guide them for planning and how the process is going to work. So it's always very helpful to make them understand prior to starting services, what they have been undergoing, and how we can be a support. And screening is very, very important in the early years to facilitate and identify kids at risk. And there are, like, false positive or false negative, results can come. So sometimes they may fail the test at one attempt, maybe, but like, for example, hearing screening, they may fail the first time. That doesn't mean that the child will have hearing loss. But that can kind of alarm us, if the child has any hearing loss, or if the language delay is due to hearing loss, or any other concomitant conditions. And we can kind of refer them. And the mistake that what we're doing is, if we kind of let go, okay, the child passed this test, and so that is more severe than identifying. So it's always better to, generate, refer the family to system. And we should not make a mistake, because the consequence, if we do not identify this child early enough, that's going to be having an effect on treatment and intervention later. So,
Bhagya, I would just like to point out for this thing that most of us, most SLPs work in a single condition. But when you're working in a collaborative process, when you're working as a joint team, as a child development center, you have all the professionals presented. So hence, it is very important. See, a part of the assessment we take up, but there are a lot of assessments. There are a lot of in terms of diagnosis. We get a client, we start with therapy, we do things, but it is also essential to get a proper diagnosis done. So initially we would say, take 3 months of therapy and 4 months of therapy, then we'll do a diagnostic thing. But in some places I have seen, first the diagnostic protocol takes by the child is diagnosed as to whatever the condition, be it autism, be it ADHD, hearing loss. So first the whole entire diagnostic process takes place, and then the therapy starts. But here what happens, okay, there's a speech issue, go to a speech therapist. There's a sensory issue, go to the OTist. If the child, they go to a, there's rarely they approach the neurologist first or the developmental pediatrician first. In Mumbai, at least in my setup, I see most of them coming from the developmental pediatrician to us. But it so happens that they may not feel that way, that they may not feel the child has autism or ADHD. But what I have seen is that as soon as the case comes to an SLP, they really start with the therapy rather than thinking of actually diagnosing the condition first. So we must take care about the screening assessment. We must take care about the collaborative processes. We must take other professionals also into consideration. What therapy the child is undergoing, what other things the child is doing. So then we are, and all the process, like sometimes I do ask my parents, what is the OT doing? What did you go to a psychologist, and have you done a developmental assessment? Have you done all these protocols? And eventually, after some time, once I have developed the rapport with the parents, once I have developed a proper, so developing a rapport also is very important. We should not be so much into therapy that we forget that in US, it's like completely a proper support given to the parents. Therapy is
no,
just
although
not
it is proper support, we have like timelines. That is like a very, very long process. So from the time they come, they have 45 days, 60 days, and a month again to develop a plan. So meanwhile, sometimes what happens is the family is kind of lost, and they are very anxious. So sometimes what we do is school SLPs, we are very mindful. So we keep the meetings together, so that we kind of prioritize depending on the first visit, kind of gets a feel, how the family is, what is the need of the child and everything. So when we judge, okay, this family has resources, yeah, or if they are in high demand and high needs, we kind of prioritize the testing. So sometimes these testing and screenings kind of go waitlisted, but at the same time, we have to kind of give values to what is the concern of the family, and how severe is the condition, and how
absolutely,
yeah,
Bhagya, absolutely,
yeah.
yeah.
So sometimes what happens is, people who come, they do not have economically, they are backward, they do not have insurances, they do not have money. So sometimes what happens is, as SLPs, I kind of send them to the school counselor or a social worker to help them if they have some free resources where they can go do the hearing testing, or some of the things are kind of very expensive, some of the things are kind of given to them. So, but as an SLP, we have to be aware, earlier the better. So, and sometimes these kids get waitlisted, but we have to give like, 4 or 5 places, so where they can reach out and, kind of prioritize. Or what we do is we write a letter of justification telling that, this person came to me and, and this would be very helpful if you can prioritize and give them a prior appointment, so we can kind of gather more information. So in all possible ways, as an SLP, we have to be very cautious, and timeline has to kind of run into us, and every child has to be taken, because, all the kids are the future of the society, right? So make sure that, we have to help the family to identify the needs, so they can also, we are also parents, right? So we should kind of be empathetic to them. And coming to the screening again, so health related and developmental purpose I was talking about, right? So sometimes they have like heart conditions or limb conditions, so we have to make sure that we refer to the proper professionals. And there are like a lot of types of screening that I am going to help, and I would try to go a little bit faster because, we have to do the testing. So individual focused screening, community focused screening, diagnostic testing, establishing readiness for guidance intervention. So individual screening or focus screening is like usually 0 to 2 years. This is done at the doctor's office. Kids who are at medical risk usually are coming under this criteria, individual focused screening, like hearing loss or syndromes or cerebral palsy. And then community focused screening is in US, lead is a big time, lead toxicity is a big time there. And then we will kind of, make sure that there are some neighborhoods, because there are researchers that kind of support that, lead toxicity can lead to language delay and, kind of hamper the normal development. It can kind of have an effect on cognition. So we have to make sure that they have a pro forma that they fill out. If the family kind of falls in that locality, they have some other follow-ups for that. And then diagnostic testing, again, we are doing like a screening that's called an assessment to refer to proper full-fledged diagnostic testing. And establishing readiness, I was kind of telling about school readiness, right? So 0 to 3 years, if they are kind of coming to us, as early as possible, we have to kind of finish up the testing and start services. And it would also be helpful while they are kind of turning 3 or 3.5 years, we can kind of help them set up like a special education program along with all the other services. So and it would also be helpful if we can guide the family with a lot of modifications or accommodations. And for guiding intervention, so we were doing testing for starting and exploring community resources for therapy services. I have a 3.5-year-old child. So what happened was the special education teacher, she had like, some referrals from the university. So she kind of referred one of the boy for cochlear implant. So that was very nice of her. So now the child is able to, has undergone cochlear implant and the child is able to hear better. So we have to kind of work as a team and then, understand the needs of the family, understand the conditions very well before we kind of go ahead and jump into conclusions. So coming back to the topic we are going to talk about the functional assessment, right? So everyone is kind of aware of traditional versus functional. Traditional is like a direct assessment. Functional is like putting together, if the child is not able to participate in the traditional assessment, we kind of put together with all the tools that we have. Or it could be that we do the direct assessment and get all the other informations and collaborate and do the best clinical judgment to come up with a plan. So direct assessment, the focus is on assessing the linguistic skills, but it will ignore the psychosocial and cognitive aspects. For example, 0 through 5 years. So there we do something called preschool language scale. So it's like a paper pencil test where, the mom or dad kind of gets the child to us around 3 years or, less than 3 years to the SLPs, and we kind of have set of questions, and then we have some manipulatives like teddy bear or rattles, colors, pen and paper, cars. Um, so what we do is we kind of, we have set of questions and then we kind of assess them. So we do auditory comprehension and expressive communication. So we don't consider anything other than that. We don't talk about the parenting style. We don't talk about the hours of child is spending at home or daycare. We don't, when we do only based on the scores, we kind of qualify the child. But unlike that, when we are doing like a functional assessment approach, we kind of do the testing. We kind of, make sure that we have opportunities to observe the child at various locations. We kind of get the report from the doctors, and, collaboration happens in functional assessment. So in direct assessment, sometimes the day when the child comes to me, it would be like, very sleepy or, not cooperative or had a bad day. So maybe the, test scores may kind of fall below the expected range. So depending on that day, if I kind of feel, okay, the child has a delay. So that would be like an underestimate or inadequate measure of the communicative performance. So what we need to do is, again, we need to make sure that if clinically we feel the child did not participate that day, we can always request for 1 or 2 more sessions or a different day when we can have prior appointments with the mom or dad, and then, to come on the better time of the day. And sometimes what happens is the child is very anxious when they come into a session. So they're coming into an office or, like a place, it's all very formal. So sometimes the child gets bored, if you keep on asking questions. And sometimes, the child may not be exposed to some things, and I ask questions like that. For example, I was kind of telling, the kids who are kind of migrating from here or Mexico to US. So some of the things are very different from what I have seen in India versus there. The kids over there are exposed to tons of things, but as a child, when I grew up, it is very different. And so goes the kids who have recently migrated. So we have to be very, culturally responsive when we ask questions, or if we kind of feel that, if the tests are not normed for them, we have to kind of write a note or an observation that, as per the parents' report, the child is not exposed to, or, is unaware of things like some of those things. And then tests chosen should be age appropriate with content and methodology. For example, a 5-year-old comes to me. I have to, if I'm only going by direct traditional testing, I have to kind of choose a test which is normed for that age chronologically, and then I have to have which is standardized for that language population. So it is very hard to get some tests in some languages. I'm not sure about here, but in there, getting a Spanish test is very, very hard. So what we do is we pick and choose some of the tasks from English, and then we give it to them in Spanish by a Spanish speaking person, and then kind of, write a note, and the test was unavailable in that language. So we kind of, did this testing with the help of the interpreter. So the test results may be either, inadequate or underestimate of the skills or overestimate of the skills. So please, interpret with caution. So we have like a statement that we have to give, and then depending on after the testing, when the child starts coming for therapy, when the progress note comes, the child would all we have to kind of repeat that again. So traditional tests are done, don't kind of easily cause socially meaningful treatment goals. Yesterday I was kind of mentioning, the child will name objects with 90% accuracy. So this kind of lacks ecological or social validity. So whenever we are picking and choosing the test and the goals, we have to make sure that what is the purpose? Efficiently functioning in the community or home or school is our criteria. So depending on that, in mind, we have to do the testing. And it also, the traditional test helps in data collection. But, data is not very, it is very important, but that is not the goal for testing, right? So child is important. The family values are important. How the child is going to transition from these years is very important. So the time lost cannot be regained. So we had to make sure that we had to be mindful in choosing the test. And coming to the functional assessment is very useful. And observing a toddler at home, or in a like a marketplace, or in a playground, is very helpful, because we don't have to tell the child, okay, I'm kind of but the marketplace, like it's very different from here to there. I usually I don't recommend that in here, but definitely observing the child in a playground is highly recommended. Observing the child at home is highly recommended. Observing the child at daycare or a preschool is recommended. So across the situation, how the child is, if the child is able to use words with the familiar adults, so we can kind of gather those informations. And then,
Sometimes Bhagya, I ask the parents to get me videos also.
yeah, that's very helpful.
If you can't go, means sometimes parents also bluff. Sometimes parents would say, yes, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and sometimes parents would say, my child can do this, my child can do that.
Yeah.
So better, get a video, get me a video. Okay, my child is interacting with this, my child is hugging, but I have never seen the child doing that in the session, or I've seen the child little reclusive. So different things happen in the session. But if you want to see a functional based assessment, it will be a more of an open approach. So if you can't go, at least ask them to get you videos. I think that is quite possible for them.
Yeah, it's definitely a burden on the adults, but sometimes what happens is, as a mom, I kind of overestimate sometimes on my own kids, right? So they kind of even overestimate the skills. Oh, the child can do this, child can do that, child can tie a shoelace, child can kind of dress up. But given a situation when the child comes to the clinic, if the child wants to use a bathroom, sometimes the child would not go into the bathroom on his own, unable to pull up the pants on his own, or things happens. But mom would have filled the questionnaire telling the child can dress up on his own, he can go to the bathroom on his own. So some of those skills mom or dad will overestimate. But always, we cannot just go with what parents says. The videos are very helpful, as Chanda mentioned. And our own observation is very helpful. We have to make sure that we take notes of sometimes what happens is when the child comes to the clinic, so we have to kind of be very cautious in writing. The child was pleasant and happy as the child entered the clinic. The child was able to sit at the independently. The child was able to ask questions and answer questions independently to the SLP. And he asked for breaks. He was able to maintain good amount of attention span. The child was able to look at or maintain eye contact with the adults in the assessment room. So some of those things we have to, if we know what are the norms of social skills, if we know the norms of the expectations of that particular child age, so it's always helpful to put together. But and as I was mentioning, functional assessment is very helpful for identifying the strength of the child, weaknesses of the child, unlike the traditional approach where, sometimes the child, if they don't cooperate or if they don't answer, that doesn't mean that the child would not know, but, we have to reattempt multiple times. So an example, of a functional goal would be, Jill will use phrases like I want or I dislike across the day to, speak her needs or wants or protest, to navigate and function efficiently. So instead of kind of telling, Jill will label, these many nouns, 50 nouns or 50 verbs, you can even say that, Jill will be able to label objects, or because, when the child is at preschool, the child should know what is a overcoat, what is a cap. The child should know what is a pencil, what is a pen, all of those, right? So definitely we have to make sure that we are getting in, having a goal for more functional use. And then always we have to make sure that the testing results, once we are done with screening and testing, we have to make sure that it is all kept confidential, and we have to have authorization to share with people who is kind of appropriate. We judge this person is going to be helpful, because sometimes I don't know if that happens here in in US. What happens is, for vocational guidance, like, help, or at the later age, like 18 and 21 years, they kind of get some letters from SLPs, so they have some free things that they can use. So they kind of come for some certificate purposes. So we have to make sure that, if that is okay to kind of declare this person has disability, if it's real or not, if we can share information with them. So we have to have a person who is kind of acting responsible. And in addition, we have to make sure that, as I was kind of mentioning before, whatever test we are using, we have to make sure that we document if we kind of used, any help, or how hand over hand cues or verbal cues or anything. So that kind of helps. Writing detailed report is one more big thing that, SLPs should kind of remember. Functional assessment, along with the good collaborative, good detailed report, kind of is very helpful when we kind of share that with the other team members. So if the report is very, very simple and, a few lines, and then we charge, X amount of money, then they would feel, oh, I've spent a lot of time with this person. I don't see that anything in writing. So what was happening? So, and then, over the period of time, I may forget Jill, who is Jill, and what was Jill's age when she came to me. So sometimes, if the parents are okay, they want a second opinion, from me, this writing a detailed report will be very helpful to compare for them from my report to the next person. So it's very, as a parent's point of view, we have to kind of be very, mindful. The detailed report is very, very important. And then we have to make sure that we share that in a nice and, less anxious way. So because, no mom or dad is going to have ears to tell, oh, your child has special needs. It's very hard for them. I know, they would have identified, oh, there is a challenge in my child, but definitely after our assessment, it is very, very hard for them to take it. So we have to be very mindful, and when we share the reports to them. And then always make sure that try to do the testing one-on-one, even if it's functional or traditional. And sometimes warming up activities to build rapport with the child. When the child comes, before hand, if you can, have a questionnaire filled by the mom, or if you can call the mom and ask, mom or dad ask, what are the things they like, and if he has any particular interest for cars, or like a wind-up toys, or rattles, or if he has any special allergies, or things like that. So it is always very, very helpful for us to understand, because in that way, maybe the child, he has a frowny face when he comes in, and when he sees this, type of reinforcer in the room, oh, why can't I try this person now? Okay, why can't I sit and talk to this lady now? So I'm going to be a stranger to a little guy who comes in, but definitely if I am able to be child friendly and down to earth, if I can sit in a place and make sure that you have your office a little bit more child friendly, with not too distracting environment, but some carpets with some numbers or some characters, and you can have like a neat and tidy place will be always most interested. So you can have some child friendly books with some velcro things where they can kind of take it off, and some manipulative toys. So when you go shopping or when you kind of collect materials for testing, make sure that have where before you buy something, make sure that okay, this toy can be used for multiple purpose. So for example, like the wooden puzzle with all the animals, so we can see if the child is able to match things, if the child is able to we can use those puzzle, like the wooden puzzle thing, like for example animals. So I can say that I can have the child take out all the things and put it on the table, or I can say that take all the things and put it under the table. All of those I can use it for following directions. And I can say, okay, can you put the dog, can you put the cat, or things like that. So I am kind of testing the receptive vocabulary. And then I can say, I can point to the dog or I can point to the cat and ask, what is this? Who makes the meow sound? I can kind of use one single toy for different purposes. And cause and effect, light up toys are kind of very helpful with the population. I'm going to talk about the intervention in the next session, so I can kind of give you all a list of things, like possible toys list I have. I can kind of give that to you all. And then make sure that the session is short, like not too short. Definitely half an hour session to 45 minutes is good enough. And then the first 5 minutes, you can kind of have the child do a free play when the child comes. And make sure that you don't keep the room filled with too many toys. You have like a locked box. Always, as you all know, there should be a demand for communication. So, maybe, what you can do is you can entice the child with a rattle and then put it on, under a blanket or inside the box. And then, the child can ask, you can check the curiosity, the facial expression of the child. If the child is able to locate or, is curious about where the rattle went. And, if he's asking using words or, using gestures or, reaching out to the things like that. So always make sure that if you have like a quick notepad to write whatever the child is doing, it would be very helpful, because everyone cannot store a lot of information in our brain. Make sure that you take at least small tiny little notes, or if you have like an assistant who can help you, you can kind of dictate, okay, the child is reaching out. And when the child is doing some like building up, stacking the, blocks or something, you can have a little interview with the, mom or dad. What would the child do at home for hunger, thirst, or, simple things. Always, when the child does something, make sure that you reinforce. Verbal praise is the best, and then always, have like an exaggerated facial expression with like good loudness to make sure that you gain the attention of the child when testing. And then always make sure that you have kind of in the first visit, kind of collect all the team members where the child is going. Like if the child is initial visit to your session, like clinic, so you can always write, possibly, I'm not very sure, this is only like a half an hour or 45 minutes I spent with your child, but depending on my expertise, depending on whatever we kind of feel, these may be some of the options your child should kind of have assessments done on. Otherwise, if the child is already, having a second opinion with you, if the mom says, oh, 6 months before I went to a clinic in, Mumbai, and then we recently moved to, Chennai. So you can always say, hey, where did you meet? Who tested you in Mumbai? Can you share those details to me? So 6 months is very, very, less amount of time. So, you can kind of pick and choose what are the tests they did and what are the observations they did. And, if the child has grown, made gains over the year, like the 6 months, or if you have to repeat the test, or, you can use your own functional tools to assess. So you don't have to kind of, expose the child again, oh, let's start from ABC again, let's do the testing. So you have to make it a little bit more viable for the family also. And if the family has done an OT assessment, or if the family says, oh, my son had a tongue tie removed, you can always say, hey, can you give the name of the surgeon who did that? And then, you can have a conversation with them. And it would be always beneficial. Parents are the experts, parents know more than anybody else. So always make sure that, talk to the family a few minutes beforehand. What are the likes, dislikes, and, if the child likes to kind of, follow directions, or if the child is shy, whatever, and reinforcer, if the child has any allergies. And then, or you can do that session, like one session without the child, where you can have your parents fill out the questionnaires for you. And then, and this is very important. So whenever, at the end of the session, please make sure you write the future appointment dates in a piece of paper, and then make sure that if that time of the day is okay with the family and the child to come again for the follow-up visit. If they say, hey, you know what, on Saturdays he goes to OT sessions, do not pressure the family to come on a Saturday. So instead, 2 sessions like OT and SLP on the same day may tire the child. So we can say, what other days are you available? And depending on your availability, if the SLPs are not available, so we can kind of, we have to work with the family, to gather all those appointments taken care of. So this is again, this is all the repetition. I'm not going to go in depth with this. Early intervention is very, very important. And, it would kind of help, to understand the complexity of the needs of the child, disabilities, and how we can integrate into the community, and how we can support the family. And, as we were talking about, so the professionals are family educators, childcare centers, early intervention program, the team, speech pathologists, psychologists, physiotherapists, physicians, occupational therapists, nurses. So nurses are really very important. Outwardly, they would not sound very important to us. But for example, if the child has seizure disorder, we have to have, the nurse involvement, because they are the one who kind of works with the physician to get the medications to us. They teach when to give, what are the signs of symptoms we have to observe in the child. And then physiotherapists are very essential, because if the child is wheelchair bound, or if the child has any mobility issue, they will be very helpful. Occupational therapists for sensory issues, or if the child has any fine motor developmental issues. So, and from the family, I've been talking a lot about family. I'm not going into depth. Clinical psychologist, again, if the child has any intellectual challenges, disabilities that we suspect, or maybe, you know, the language delay may be contributed because of the cognitive functioning. So we can always check if the family had any prior visits to the clinical psychologist. You know, no parent would like to listen, oh, you know, the child has mild mental retardation, or, you know, sometimes it's very hard for the family to kind of absorb. But definitely as a team member, one of the prime team member, SLPs should make sure that we kind of help them cope up with the feelings also. And early interventionist is you know, big time. So 0 through 3 years is time where you know, this early intervention team, you know, they kind of go where into the communities. So they all work together for the testing. In US we call it as, you know, child find team. Child find is like, you know, the team, you know, they work very closely in monitoring things. They kind of share information between each other. They find resources, or they find kind of support each other's findings, you know, how we can justify the need. And then occupational therapist, I was kind of talking about, you know, organizational skills or sensory processing, you know, fine motor issue. Physician is like a big time role, because, you know, 0 to 2 years, the screening happens at the doctor's office. So usually SLPs do not have a lot of testing to do, except, you know, we kind of do like a observation. We do like a lot of play assessment. We do video analysis. We do like questionnaire filling. We also gather information from the doctor's office, and we kind of put together everything. And if they have any other problem, like I was mentioning about, you know, seizure disorder, or any other toxicity, encephalopathy, or any other conditions that needs follow up, we have to have a good rapport with the physician's office. And always we have to make sure that the family have, you know, a particular doctor they can kind of go in emergencies. They have to have like a pediatrician, a neurologist, or a, you know, a neuropsychologist. So like a orthopedic, like for example, if the child has some limb issues, or you know, wheelchair bound, orthotics is needed, or, you know, things like that. So always, it's always good to educate the family how to have like a diary of all the telephone numbers listed, you know, in case of emergency, how they act. And social worker, I'm not sure about you know, that particular thing in India, but definitely I think, you know, due to the developments that's happening, every center has their own you know, counselor and a social worker these days. So typically what happens is, economically, if they're not able to have funding, or, you know, to buy hearing aids, or, you know, to come for therapy, you know, these people are the one, you know, who can coordinate help for, you know, surgery, if they don't have like a good amount of money to kind of you know, invest. So they can kind of find resources or charity. And also, you know, coping up and family stress is very much on the family, because, you know, every mom or dad would you know, would love to have a typical child. Definitely if there is some kind of a deviance or a delay, it's going to be hard on them. So these social workers can be a, you know, person who can patch up a lot of things. As we are speech pathologists, we know our role. We kind of test, you know, receptive language skills, expressive language skills. We do big time, you know, for help in social skills, and also articulation, voice, and other things. Behavior therapist. So, you know, if the child has attention issues, so, you know, or if the child has any tantrums, or if they have some emotional disturbances, so the behavior therapist kind of helps us. And I was kind of mentioning physiotherapist, audiologist, ophthalmologist, you know, genetics. You know, if they have like a syndrome, or if they have any other disorder related to the, you know, they can. And also we have to see if these people have any cultural beliefs, or if they are from an organization, Sometimes what happens is there are like a lot of myths. Oh, this can happen if the child is a late talker. There is a thing that where I grew up from, you go pray to this place, you go do that, the child will start talking. So definitely, there are some possibility, but definitely as a professional who is I've been a professional for the past 16, 17 years, I definitely know that prayers alone are not very, going to give the best results. Prayers along with all of these, therapists, the team professionals who can work hand in hand, and the parents, who is able to digest, okay, the child has a need and how I can move forward. So everyone has to work as a team. So coming to Chanda, do you want to recap what happened? Okay, I think Chanda. Okay, so we've done a lot about basic things what I can do with functional assessment. So now I'm going to kind of discuss various tools what you can do. We can do observations and checklist, and observation and checklist is like you can send a note to the teachers, or you can send a note to the family, how what all happens at the various locations, and have them describe things. And anecdotal records is like you can have the family. Where? Okay. So anecdotal notes are something that the teachers or other professionals writes a descriptive notes. Like for example, Ron is a 4-year-old, 10-year-old, 4.10-year-old child, and at the school he was kind of participating in a sensory table. So while he was playing, he kind of had play with friend Jesse and making a castle, and he took turns and enjoyed the time. So these all details from the teachers will help us understand, okay, there are kind of no social challenges. The child is able to work as a team with the peer. The child is able to, and then if the teacher is able to write, okay, he used words or phrases to ask for things, that kind of gives us information, okay, the child is verbal. And then running records are much longer. So running records are something similar to anecdotal notes, and then we do it for a specific amount of time, like 30 minutes. We kind of observe the child, and then we kind of write a report. And then portfolios is like, the teacher can kind of get some information for us about the work samples. And home inventories, again, what all happens at home and how we can have open-ended, questionnaire response from the home. So developmental screening, standardized assessment, we kind of discussed a few things before. And then coming to, so I have other things to share. I'm going to share a couple of things, and some of the things will be coming as a takeaway. So this is a thing that I made for myself. Are you all able to see the screen? So whatever we discussed today, so I have kind of made us a questionnaire, like parent caregiver interview guiding questions. So where, you can fill out these demographic information, and, health and medical, what are the things you need to know? and education and services, like, other services, or when did they do, where did they do, you can take notes. And then home, what are the languages they speak at home, a time spent, preferred toys, aversions, behavior. And then for expressive language, how does a child communicate, gestures or words or phrases, or verbal or non-verbal. And then, if the child is verbal, how many words the child uses, how intelligible is to a familiar or an unfamiliar listener. If the child has any articulatory disorder, like, kind of pronunciation issues, and if the child, if you're able to understand the child most of the time or only sometimes. So these questions will be guiding for us to kind of choose what type of testing we have to do. And then, if the child is able to play, if the child is able to ask for help, if the child kind of says, use words to protest, or if the child has any other behaviors to show protest. And then if the child is able to use some of, ways, if the child is verbal, depending on this one I have given in English, depending on if it's Hindi or Marathi or, things like that, what you can do is you can kind of come up with, the development in your language. And then during the language sample or, conversation, you can make notes to yourself. And then following simple directions. So this is very, these are questions for the family or caregivers at home. But when the child comes to your clinic, you have to have an eye. You are looking for all these in your settings too. So because, sometimes mom or dad would overestimate and, that my child can do this, my child can do this. But in the session, you cannot see anything. So make sure that, as reported by mom or dad, the child was, reported this way, but in the clinic during the testing, this happened. But, as an SLP with experience, you will definitely know if there is a challenge in, auditory processing, or if the child has any difficulty understanding. And then for vocabulary and stuff like that, I have other things like you can have like a basic picture book you can make, or, you can buy some, common picture books and keep it in your clinic. So you can, for the vocabulary. One second. Okay, social skills again, familiarity, communication with familiar adults, unfamiliar adults, and then how is a playing, if the child, if you're going and observing the child in daycare or a school, if the child is able to play together, or if the child has another child at the same, that's called parallel play. The child, your a student, whoever you're targeting, maybe playing with another child with a closer proximity, but will not be engaging in conversation with another child, or will not be sharing. So that's called parallel play. Cooperative play is like where, oh, can I have that? Can, if they're building a castle, can I have that? Can I have this? Or, imaginative plays like, pretend play or imaginative plays like, as I was mentioning, the preschool language scale, we have like a lot of manipulatives like bear and a blanket and a cup and a spoon. Oh, the bear is hungry. Oh, let me feed the baby. Oh, the baby is done eating. Okay, let's clean up the toys and put the baby to sleep. The child would be kind of talking to themselves, or show some of these actions in while we are testing. So and also transitioning is one thing that you have to kind of note. If the child is able to, if you're done with something, if the child is able to clean up, or if the child is pushing away things and then going into the next thing, or if the child is organized in asking for next thing, and eye contact, taking turns, all of these, sometimes in one clinic setting it's very hard to gather all these information. So that is a need for functional assessment. So when you're picking and choosing a test, standardized test, definitely you can gather all these information, following directions or answering yes no questions, or all of those things. But definitely functional assessment where you can observe over the period of time, it's definitely very helpful. And then you can take a language sample. Here I've given you very less space, but you can have your own sheet where you can record what the child is talking in a recorder, or you can write it and transcribe it. And I have a subscription for Teachers Pay Teachers, so in US. But I don't know how it is. There are like free resources and resources you can buy. And I kind of pick and choose. If I like something, I buy, or I kind of pick and choose something. If it's free, I kind of download it and keep it. And then I don't kind of give it to everyone, but we can kind of use it for personal purpose. So you can write it in a sheet of paper and then transcribe it. So there is a way how we can calculate mean length utterance. So you can do that. And then oral peripheral mechanism is very important. For example, a child is coming to you with articulation issues. So language, when you screen for language, it's all, grossly within functional limits. You have to make sure that, if the child is able to, stick out the tongue, if the teeth are aligned well, if the underbite, overbite, missing teeth, the lip structures, sometimes a child would not like somebody looking into the mouth or touching. So depending on if you have some kind of a screener you can give, you can test the back of the tongue, like functioning, like the development. I have like a thing that I'm going to share. So this is like a free thing that I got it on the linguist system. This one has like very good resource, like this one. So this one has like a lot of phoneme development and all of those development norms. So this is all kind of is all for English speaking. So definitely, as I was mentioning, please be mindful to kind of pick and choose what is essential for you from this presentation, and relate that with your cultural population, and then make the best clinical judgment. And so additional notes, if you have any phone numbers you want to write, or articulation, voice, and then when you're asking them to fill out these, you can have them write what is a concern, what is the goal of the child. And then I use this one for normal language milestone. And then so 9 to 12 months. This is some kind of a thing that I got it over the period of time on the internet, and I printed. And then say, for example, a 3-year-old, is definitely the milestone is the child has to engage in short dialogue, express emotions, and, use all of these, she will be able to retell a story and things like that. So depending on, so depending on, the motor milestones and everything, you have to kind of make notes. And then one more thing is, one second, evaluation. So this is one more checklist that I use. So types of play skills, I was kind of talking about symbolic play, dramatic play, and then oromotor exam. So these ones can kind of act as your, precursors, what you're looking for. Like, for example, receptive language skill, yes and no questions. You can kind of have like a set pro forma that you can make it. Okay, is this, you can have like a picture of a bus and have, is this a bus? Yes or no. Is this like a tree? All of those. So definitely this one has, the age in which the development has to happen. So if something is alarming, you will have detailed testing to be done. And then this one I use because this is like a early development of expressive language for parents. So around 1.5-year-old, 1-year-old mama dada, and when the child is around 2 to 2.5-year-old, approximately these many words is expected, and around 5-year-old these many words are expected, and all of these grammatical markers and vocabulary is expected. So some deviance can happen in with respect to your language. So making something like this for yourself would be very helpful. And then this one I kind of shared with you. And then so this is a home questionnaire that I kind of send home when we do the PLS5 in my school setting. So this one has, so when playing my child, what all, when my child tells me how he feels, my child enjoys attention. Example, my child can smile when I talk to him. So mom or dad will kind of is given a situations, and then they kind of mark it for us. And then this is a way we can say, have them repeat some of these words, like for checking the back of the tongue or front of the tongue, and things like that. And then if we already know the delay, the needs are due to some conditions, so might as well, if the child is cooperative, if you have a standard testing, traditional testing you have, you can start with that, and then kind of put together you know you can put together as a report, like based on the formal testing, based on my observation and parent report, and professional collaboration, we come up with these observation. And so always make sure we have to remember a lot of things. So we have to treat parents with respect. It's important to ensure that we have a very cordial relationship and collaborative, respectful relationship with the family. We have to keep make sure that we are professionals, okay, not experts. We can guide them. Okay, so we cannot say, this is what you have to do. You can always recommend things. And then our goal is to create partnership and work with the parent to help the child. So child is the main focus, the medium is through the parent. And these are the things, tips. As an SLP, we have to be a good listener. We have to communicate strengths first. So as we all know that, even in your own personal life, you would like somebody to talk to you about I'm sorry, one second. So in personal life too, we love to hear all strengths first, right? So likewise, even when we are kind of working as a professional, we had to make sure that we kind of communicate the strength of the child first. And then we had to make sure that, gesturally, we had to make sure that the family understands that we are empathetic to the messages that has been shared with us. We have to make sure that we maintain confidentiality. We have to understand the emotional needs of the family. We have to be very sensitive. We just don't go and say that, oh, your child has this, your child has this. And you can say that based on all of these, I, come up with this one and I recommend this. And you have to say that, we have to tell the process to them after every couple of, maybe, depending on the protocol of your institution or your clinic or your private practice, you can say that after 10 sessions, we will kind of, do an informal testing again. And always make sure that you give a home maintenance program or a home thing. You can always relate, the goals with the mom or dad, and then explain them how you can reinforce from home. And SLPs are just working for 40 minutes or 30 minutes, right? So the mom or dad is the caregivers or the childcare providers. They spend a lot of other time out of the 24 hours. So we had to make sure that everybody works in the same pace. And then we had to make sure that we share resources and informations that is available. We should not give false hopes. Okay, in 10 sessions, your child is going to, talk a dialogue or things like that. So depending on the norms, depending on the ability of the child, how we can grow, move up in ladder. And you have to think about the happiness and emotions of the family before we move forward. And make sure that you give time for the family to absorb what has been happening in their life until now, until they have come to you. And when moving forward, give them time. You have to what I do is I kind of have the child play for some time, and then relate with the mom or dad. I know usually moms, like they have some kind of relationship. They like to kind of talk a little bit more informally, but maintain professionalism when you talk. And make sure that you maintain connections with them outside work, but make sure that it's a little bit more professional. And yeah, so this is what it's all, no one test will kind of give us all the information. So we have to kind of combine the traditional approach and the functional assessment tools, what we kind of discussed, put together and come up with the best possible recommendations of the child. And also I would highly recommend the family to sit in the sessions with you. So not in the first session, maybe after 1 or 3 sessions, if they are able to um, see how you get responses from the child. So we'll talk a little bit more about those things in our intervention. I think we have another session on the 17th and the 20th. So we'll meet again. So thank you, everyone. I think we are done for the day. So if you have any questions, please contact either me or Chanda, and I would love to talk to you all whenever possible, and I can share and help. If you have any child who has some, if you're beginners, for example, if you're already experienced and running clinics and doing things, you are already an expert. But definitely there are a lot of new therapists, and if you need help, I am ready to mentor you, or definitely I can help you find resources. Thank you so much.
Bhagya, thank you so much for this wonderful session. We had a very good, and everybody's been very appreciative about it on the chat box. Thank you so much. Bhagya, I would like, there are very few questions. I would like to just put that to you right now. A few questions, just a couple of them are there. So if the lecture is almost over, if anybody wants to leave, they can leave. But a couple of questions are there. There are 4 questions only. So I will just ask. In the example of functional outcome, is it required to explain the goal in measurable terms like 90% of the time, 70% of the time? What do you think about this, Bhagya? Should we always make our, the child can speak certain words in certain times of time, or 90% of the time? How do we rate this?
So usually what is, I think 80% and more of the opportunities, if you have a number, what you're looking for, definitely it's always good, so you will really work for it. Like, for example, if I'm taking a test, okay, 10 questions, and out of that I have to get a passing score of 8 to move on to the next level. So I will always be looking forward in my mind, okay, you know what, my goal is to get 8. Okay, with typicals, getting 8 and above may be very easy, okay, with independence. But with non-typicals or developmentally delayed, it's very hard to give them a number. But however, you can say that with 80% accuracy, with help, with adult help, with verbal cueing, or, things like that. You can kind of give some accommodations, but if you don't have a number, definitely, I think we are not going to work for it. So whenever I am writing goal, I do a SMART goal. Like, I'll be specific, measurable, attainable, very realistic, in what I am writing.
Most of the time we say that the child is able to repeat this so many number of times. The child is able to give eye
Yeah.
contact in these particular situations.
Yes.
The child is,
So
the
definitely, yeah,
the child
you to
still
have
does
a
not look at
baseline.
a
Yes.
stranger. Yeah, so we do mention if around the corner, if what is present, what is not present, what is
Mhm.
present most of the time, we can always say that.
Yeah, definitely. If you have like a number what you want, then it's always we are working up the ladder, right? So if it's 50% of the opportunities, then definitely, oh, this or this, right? For 80% and above is kind of recommended. But just in case, if you are very sometimes when the child comes to you, they will be non-verbal, they will not even tell you a word. That doesn't mean that the child will not be able to get 80%, but definitely starting wise, like you can have a long-term goal and then a short-term goal, and then you can have some measurable objectives. Okay, by you know 8 weeks, this child will label 15 objects with cues, or uh, with repetition, or whatever, like however the child is responding to you, you can kind of have like a long-term goal. The main goal is effectiveness in communication. Effectively, the child is able to needs and wants. So for that safety and needs and wants, how are we going to do? If you know the norms, if you know the observational, if the child is able to do, and see, books can give like n number of things, but definitely the child is real in front of you, right? The child is able to function at that, then move one step, or come down to one step where the child is more successful, and then go up. I think it's very child specific, but definitely have like like an idea of what you are. The goals of the family is very important, and then how you're able to address that is very important.
Second question, Bhagya.
Mhm.
I have a child, 4 years, 6 months. On the first day, the child is mute in front of me. So I just interviewed the parents as per the query. I asked them to start with the therapy for a week. I will do ongoing assessment during therapy. After 15 days, I came to a point that the child is delayed speech and language development and great fear to strangers. Now, after providing therapy, she's able to cooperate with me to great extent. Parents are pleased, but only one point is that she's not able to communicate in social settings. She knows how to do, but in front of strangers, she doesn't want to utter a word. What would
Yeah,
you say?
maybe maybe stranger anxiety, selective mutism. I don't know if you have heard about that. That's very, very common in some of the school going kids, older kids, because of the bullying, or because of the anxiety. Because if sometimes what happens is, see, if I'm not fluent to talk in front of the public, I will not talk. I will, stammer, or I will kind of, do all those secondaries. I will look there, like, not look at the, there are like, maybe the child has, maybe, I don't know how, I've not seen the child, but definitely the less fluency, like, the word choices are not there. And, I think that kind of maybe, or the stranger anxiety. So what I can recommend is, do an ongoing sessions, and make sure, you have family as a part of the session. And then when, that aha moment of, when the child responds, make the family understand, okay, this is how I spoke to the child to get the response. So how about you encouraging the positive attitude, the social emotional piece comes into picture.
We will discuss this detail in the intervention process because it is more of an intervention question.
Yeah,
So
or can you share that particular person's phone number or email address? and then, I can talk to them, and with my knowledge, I can kind of explain. But,
Okay.
if, it depends on, what are the other things, conditions the child has, and,
Fine,
things
fine.
like.
We'll see that. Acha, the next question is the children who are a part of Head Start between 3 to 5 years get admitted to a normal school or a special school after
Okay,
5 years.
Chanda, can you repeat that again?
The children who are a part of Head Start, 3
Oh,
to
Head
5
Start.
years,
Okay. Uh-huh.
do they get admitted in normal school or special school after 5 years, or are they integrated? What do you?
Okay, so this is like a very broad question. So Head Start, Early Start is the preschool in the United States. Depending on the income, depending on the special needs, they kind of go. Okay, so what happens is when the child is, 3 years, they kind of come into the school system. But by 3 and 4-year-old and 5-year-old, they attend a preschool where they are kind of exposed with the typicals, and then they do school readiness activities like, fine motor skills, circle time to kind of, facilitate social skills. They have like a recess 2 times, like in the 3 hours they do a 10 minutes break in between where they can go play outside. So they work on play skills. And so all of this, depending on the severity of the condition. For example, if the child is, multiply handicapped, definitely they are going to be in a self-contained class after 5 years. Okay, if the child has only articulation disorder, that is a thing that kind of gave them room to get into the public school. They may go into a general education after 5 years with the support of SLP, like, either pull out session or a push in session.
Okay.
And
Okay.
if the child has social communication issues, social emotional issues, again, so what happens is at 4.5 to 5 years, they have a transition meeting. They have a reevaluation done. And at that time, depending on what the scores are, depending on what the SLPs and other team members feel, the education moving forward is recommended. Always, in US, the parents have the right to deny services. The parents have right to say, oh, you know what, I'm declining special education, so my child would go to general education. So they kind of, can be very extreme, depending on, the needs of the child. The professionals, like, the team members should have to be empathetic and, value what the family says and explain them, justify your needs, justify the needs of the child, make them understand. So there are like a lot of integration that happens. For example, spectrum kids, what happens is they sometimes they go into self-contained class, or they go into general education class with support. So depending on the severity, depending on the
Bhagya, we are short of time.
yeah,
We'll cut
no
it
problem.
short. We will go on the questions pretty fast. So
Yes.
just the another question is, can you tell us about the play activities and everything? So we will do that in the intervention time. More play activities that we'll do in the intervention. So let's wait for the interventions in session. Again, the next question is resources, test materials, anything else? Anything else?
Yeah, test materials, if you want, I can email you, the tests available in US for monolingual English speakers. And for Indian population, each of us, whoever kind of joined today, like, the 30 participants, we all can have a group where they can email as a thread, or you can have a Google Docs that I can create. They can kind of write their clinic name and what are the type of tests they use. So in that way, if you can share information between each other, so that'll be kind of knowledge sharing, right? Like, for example, I have, LPT with me, and, you don't even know what LPT is. This kind of helps that, okay, there is a test that is available in what language. I can kind of start a Google Docs, and then, each of them, whoever participated today, they can kind of do a test inventory, and that can be available for, even public. Okay, in Kannada,
Next,
yeah, in Kannada we have
we
these tests, in Malayalam we have these tests.
okay. Next question is, can motor regression happen with spectrum?
Motor regression, you know what, that is a
Not seen
question.
much. Not
Yeah,
seen
I
much.
don't,
Not seen much.
yeah, I
We've
think,
not seen that much.
yes, in spectrum, we kind
There,
of have seen a lot of
there
social
can be
deviance.
yeah, there can be sensory regression, but not motor.
Motor,
Motor must be with some kind of a CNS
yeah,
involvement. See, for motor degeneration or this, there has to be a CNS involvement, or else there can be epilepsy or concomitant factors. I don't think so, na Bhagya. Sensory regression can be there, but not motor regression.
mm-hmm. I think
What do
so,
you,
but definitely if you have any, OTs or PTs who work in a team, you can check with them, or I
check
can
with them?
even
Yes, yes.
find and check out. Yeah.
Uh, Next question is, from what age do you give diagnosis for spectrum? Do we wait till the age of 3 for labeling the child? So in India,
Okay.
let me just be specific, we cannot diagnose the child.
Yeah,
As
yeah,
far as, yeah, we can support the diagnosis, the psychologists who do the developmental assessment, do final diagnosis. We don't do diagnosis. And most of the test materials are from, there is Indian scale, which is Indian scale of autistic spectrum, which starts from 1.5 or 2 years of age. SARS can be done after 3. So hence, there is a certain protocol and norm which the psychologists follow. So we must follow that. And that's what Ms. Bhagya also said, that do a comprehensive kind of a thing, do a teamwork in diagnosis. We cannot diagnose. I don't think so that's possible. What do you say,
yeah.
Bhagya?
Even in US, what happens is if the child comes with, social deviance or suspected, parents sometimes what would they do is they will never let us know this is a challenge or they've already diagnosed. They will just come telling that, oh, the child is not talking, the child is not doing this, not doing that. So the child finds screening, like the first session, we kind of do a screening tool, and then we recommend for detailed evaluation. And then the OT, PT, SLPs, depending on the needs and, referral, we kind of have an appointment with, separate. And then we kind of, I was telling, right, this child find team is a team where they work together in every schools or in preschool, so they kind of know, I think because with the experience you kind of have an eye when you see a child with articulation disorder, okay, by the way you engage in conversation in 5-10 minutes, you can kind of find, okay, the child has fronting, backing, phonological disorder, the child has social issues, the child is not able to play, some kind of thing. So you always have that thinking cap on you whenever you have a child with special needs. With your experience, and then sometimes if you are not very observant, the OTs or the psychologist would say, hey, you know what, in my session this happened, do you think we should kind of do a full assessment for this child? It's all a teamwork. So
It's all a
definitely
teamwork.
SLPs would not call a child with spectrum disorder. So we have something called an IEP, Individualized Education Program. So the psychologist is a case manager where she diagnoses as the autism or intellectually disabled, or speech therapist, we can be a case manager for only like articulation or voice, or only like language delay with no other concomitant disorders. Like if the
Yes,
child
very,
has
very
hearing
true.
loss, I will be the case manager where the audiologist will join the meeting with me. I will be the person who will be doing the testing, intimating the parents, what the diagnosis is, what is this, and how we are going to go about. So the team members will come into the table after they are done doing testing in their own zones. but we will come into the, conference room and we'll sit and talk about, okay, this date you came in, this happened. So I'll kind of talk to you about intervention in the next session.
Yeah, that time we'll do that. Okay, Bhagya, thank you so much. We had a
Thank you
wonderful
so much.
session.
I really enjoyed. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we had a wonderful session. See you all on Friday. Friday at 4. Let's meet up at Friday on 4 for the intervention strategy. We will discuss that in detail later on. We will get back to you with the notes and everything for today as soon as possible. Okay? Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye, Bhagya.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. I think the session is over, and I'm going to stop the recording and upload it. Bye bye.